Welcome to the Shopify Happy Hour. On this show, you'll hear from Shopify founders, operators, and experts on growth marketing strategies, lessons learned from the trenches, and other nuggets of e-commerce wisdom shared over a different drink each episode. Today, I'd like to welcome Will Nitze, founder and CEO of IQBAR, which makes superior brain and body fuel, including plant protein bars, hydration sticks, and instant coffees. Will, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on. So I've got my IQBAR hydration packets and plant protein bars ready to go. Before I crack both of these, how much more IQ, what sort of IQ bump am I going to get if I have both of these at the same time? Is my brain going to explode? Like, what's going to happen?
It might. No, I won't. I can't I can't get too claimy. But just pay attention to your brain and body through the early to late afternoon, and I think you'll be pleased.
Awesome, fantastic. Well, so I've got a few different flavors in front of me: peach mango, lemon lime, blueberry pomegranate, and I'm going to go with a blood orange. What are you having today?
Blood orange is a crowd pleaser. I'm doing raspberry lemonade, which was a seasonal, and we're bringing it back full time. So it's not even available for purchase, although it will be in a couple of weeks when we bring it back full time. But
cool.
We can get into that too. We have a whole LTO, limited time offer strategy, which works great. But yep.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely want to dig into that. So I've got my blood orange. So for anybody watching or listening, so it dissolves pretty quick. Just poured it right in a tall glass of water, mixed up pretty well. And cheers, good sir. Thank you for joining us.
Cheers.
That's very nice. It's very subtle blood orange. Very nice. A lot of times with hydration packets, they can taste a little like medicinal almost. This is nice. Tastes pretty clean. Just a hint of blood orange. And yeah, pretty tasty. Nice job there. So question for you. How long before I feel any, let's say, mood enhancing effects, and what would those effects be?
Yeah. So what's cool about our hydration sticks and our coffee sticks is we use a compound called magtine, which is the trademark for magnesium L-threonate. So not to nerd out too hard, but magnesium, there's a bunch of different magnesium molecules. There's magnesium chloride, magnesium citrate. So one of them is magnesium L-threonate. So it's magnesium, and then threonate is actually the bigger part of that molecule. And what's special about that is the threonate ferries it across the blood-brain barrier. So it gets magnesium into your brain. That's the only molecule that does that for magnesium. So you take any other magnesium supplement, which are usually much cheaper, it's never actually getting to your brain. So that's why magnesium L-threonate it's kind of having a moment right now. Like Huberman talks about it, and Peter Attia, and all these like talking heads are very bullish on magnesium L-threonate. So we use 750 milligrams of it per serving, and there are a bunch of clinical studies done at 1.5 grams. So we recommend you drink 2 a day, or drink 1 IQ mix and 1 IQ Joe, hydration and coffee. However you want to slice and dice it to get to 1.5 grams, that's what most of the clinicals are around. And yeah, I mean, it's fairly quickly onset, like within 15 minutes. It's not like THC or something or whatever. And it's also non-stim, so it's not like caffeine, but it's a decent analog for it is L-theanine, if you're familiar with that. So that's a compound in amino acid and tea, which basically smooths out caffeine. So it pairs really, really well with a stimulant like caffeine or nicotine or whatever. But yeah, it's just sort of like a subtle, like, you just feel better. Yeah. There's all these other things we technically could claim, like response time goes up, short-term memory goes up, blah, blah, blah. But we're kind of light on the claims on that. And it's really just clarity and mood and of course, hydration in addition to the magnesium L-threonate.
Fantastic. I love it. So thanks for helping us both be hydrated at the beginning of this podcast. So next up, we've got these plant protein bars. So I've got a few different options here: chocolate sea salt, peanut butter chip, and almond butter chip. I think I'm feeling chocolate sea salt. So tell me about what's in these.
Yeah. So it's been an evolution. So we're we're about 7.5 years in. And when it originally started, the original idea was brain food, like simple as that, brain food. So everything is body, body, body. So digestion help, or I'm going to build more muscle, or I'm going to lose weight or whatever. Like every packaged food that was functional was body centric, and no one had done something that was brain centric. So that was the original idea. There was no data that people wanted that. I just figured they would, because they wanted brain functionality from other things like pills and powders. So that was what our starting point. What we learned pretty quickly is people want brain and body value propositions. So, and what really that means just is protein and fiber in addition to the brain food element. And what do I mean by brain food, right? That's kind of like a high level thing. It really just means we center all of the inputs into the bar on things that are rich in compounds that have been shown to be good for your brain. So magnesium, vitamin E, flavonoids, medium chain triglycerides, and then lion's mane we add as well, which is a mushroom extract and shown to confer a bunch of brain benefits. But it's a delicate balance, right? Because we don't want to be a supplement, we don't want to be a medicine, and so it's just a brain healthier option. But it centers on all of those things in addition to having 12 grams plant protein. And then actually what's like really the crowd pleaser is 1 gram sugar. So, and that's not like added sugar, that's just sugar from almonds, predominantly. So high protein, low sugar is kind of the quickest way to give the value props.
Nice, good stuff. Well, I gotta say, I typically for these podcasts try to reserve consuming the products before the show so I can kind of taste it live. But I was at the office a couple weeks ago and I had some IQ bars there, and I'm doing the 75 hard fitness program. So I'm working out a bunch, eating clean, and I was just hangry. And I started some of the bars. I'm like, I gotta dig into this stuff, and I'll talk through the kind of flavor profile in a minute and what the texture is and all that stuff. But in terms of just what's in the bar, here's why I like it, and I like what you're doing is, for decades, the sort of snack bars have gone through a bit of an evolution, right? And these, let's say, protein packed or healthy snack bars. And years ago, if I'm thinking about back in the 90s when I was, working out hard, doing a bunch of strength training, there were a lot of protein bars out, but they tasted like dust or dirt, or they were just
Yeah.
really like
Chalky.
they chalky, sandy. They were not good. And then I remember there started to be a few protein bars that came out that were actually really tasty. So one is the Detour bar back in the day. It was delicious. It
Yep.
was like a
I
Snickers
remember it.
bar. But the only problem was it was basically a candy bar with some protein added. So it was definitely not good for you. There's all these ingredients you couldn't pronounce and it tasted great, but that stuff where I was like, I just don't want this in my body long term because it's probably not the best stuff. And then I think over time, over the next couple decades, there's been a lot more focus on healthy living. And so there's been more snack bars that have come out that were, let's say, clean, where it's just, a few different ingredients, fruit, vegetables, nuts, things like that. But lots of those were geared towards almost endurance athletes because it was just lots of sugar, lots of carbs, low protein. And if you're trying to watch your macronutrient profile and go with a higher protein bar, there weren't a lot of options out there.
Yeah.
So what's nice about this is you've got a good amount of protein in here. The calories are pretty low. I think they're like 160 or 170 calories per and about 12 grams of protein, low sugar, and they taste good. It's very different than the old protein bars of back in the day that were chalky or sandy. The texture here, these are pretty chewy. Each of these flavors are pretty nice. So I think the chocolate sea salt for me is a favorite, but they're all good.
Nice.
And what's nice is, there's no like junk in them. They're pretty clean. They taste good, and the functional element for the brain health is a nice little bonus. So yeah, great job with the product.
Right on. Love it.
So in terms of onset for any sort of, let's say, effect from the bars, would that be different than the hydration packet?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so there's no like, we haven't done clinicals on the bars and all this stuff. So this is kind of maybe a counterintuitive thing, right? So for the brain, really what we're first and foremost trying to do is eliminate bad things versus propose good things. That's like, so the standard American diet really is putting in, carbs that break down very easily in your gut and turn into blood glucose, cause your mental energy to go up and then crash, right? So first and foremost, you're protecting against that, right? So the absence of a negative is actually a bigger deal than the preponderance of a positive. So you just have to like frame your thinking around that first. And so it's mostly you're feeling an absence of a negative, right? So you're consuming a snack, you're feeling satiety, and then you're not crashing. It's a less I would say addictive feedback loop than, let's say, like nicotine or caffeine or cocaine or whatever, any like addictive substance that quite literally is euphoric and releases serotonin and dopamine and all that, right? So you're obviously that's going to be more, you're going to crave a cup of coffee more, but the absence of a negative is still incredibly powerful. And so that hence it's like, why are we low sugar and low net carb? Because it's good for your brain. Like you don't want to spike blood glucose sitting at your desk typing away. So it's really like, how do we protect against brain crash? More so than like, oh, I feel like Superman right now.
I love it. I think we've got a good tagline here. IQBAR, better for your brain than cocaine. There, I think
Yeah, I
that.
mean,
Yeah,
hell yeah, put that on a bumper sticker.
perfect, perfect. So tell me the story. How did you start and launch IQBAR? Where did the idea come from? And tell me about the early days of getting it started.
Yeah, so kind of a circuitous path. Which by the way is the case for most people in consumer goods, because there's no like school for consumer goods, right? It's all just people who had an idea and made something in their kitchen or lab or whatever. And usually it's, by the way, not like a technical person. So I studied psych and neuroscience in addition to poli sci in college, but really what I loved was the psych and neuroscience piece. And I wanted to work in something brain related, but I couldn't really figure out, I couldn't map that to a job. And all my friends were doing consult. I went to Harvard undergrad, so like the kind of feeder move is you get fed into a management consulting job or banking job or whatever. And I knew I didn't want to do that, either of those things. But I was really interested in the brain, and so I was interested in organizational behavior, for example, because that's the intersection of business and psychology. And can I work there somehow? And long story short, I couldn't figure it out. So I took a job in software by default, just to take a job. And it was super arcane and esoteric stuff I was doing. I was selling supply chain and ops software to oil and gas companies with no background in software or oil and gas, but totally got up the curve on both. And SaaS as a model was just taking off then. Like Salesforce was the poster boy for that. But like SaaS wasn't always the predominant model. It used to be buy Microsoft Office once, and and it's not a recurring model. But so we were one of the earlier SaaS companies, and that was cool because it was kind of startup-y. It was 150 people, and then the company went on to sell, and I was like, whoa, okay, you can sell a company for a lot of money. And I didn't benefit whatsoever. I had no equity in it, but it was just good. Even though it was like these random fields, it was good to cut my teeth in just the startup world, period. But net was not passionate about software, was not passionate about oil and gas, and was kind of looking for the exit door, call it a year or two in. And I always did want to be my own boss, and I always wanted to create something physical. Partially because I'm also not a software engineer, I'm not a coder, and I want to make the thing myself. I don't want to outsource the creation of the product. And so that kind of left physical goods. And I read a couple books that got me really interested in particular in food and bev consumer goods. And one of them was called Mission in a Bottle by the guys who started Honest Tea. And that got me fired up to start a drink company. That was my first idea, a drink company. And then I read a book called Grain Brain by Dr. David Perlmutter, which covers the intersection of nutrition and cognition. And so basically saying, hey, if you eat a pizza at lunch, you're going to feel like crap cognitively at 3 p.m. But if you eat a pizza every day for 3 decades, you're going to get Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or just garden variety cognitive decline, right? It's not going to be a good outcome for your brain. So those two things combined in my mind to be like, oh, I'm going to start a brain food company. And had no background in it whatsoever. And just sort of my first move, which by the way, this is a principle I apply to everything, is just call people who have done it or are 2-3 years ahead. So I was like, okay, what are the bar? I lived in Boston at the time. I was like, what are the bar companies in Boston? And there was like two of them. And I called both of them and I bought them coffee and I asked them 300 questions. And I was like, what should your gross margin be? Where did you manufacture? Do you self-manufacture or do you outsource manufacturing? Do you try and get cute on flavor profiles or do you just go down the center of the fairway with chocolate, peanut butter, etc.? Like blah, blah, blah. And mapped out triangulated a set of first steps and then just went and did them. And our first sales were, the other problem, by the way, was I had no money. And consumer good is a like pay to play industry. Like you have to make a bunch of physical goods and you have to pay for those. And so you have that chicken or egg problem where it's like, I need money. And one way to solve that chicken or egg problem is crowdfunding. So I did a Kickstarter and that was our first sales. And we did super well. We between Kickstarter and Indiegogo sold $90,000 of product just on this idea, right? We didn't even we had prototypes, but we had never manufactured at any scale. So and by the way, like that's not, a lot of people don't do that. They start in a commissary kitchen and they make 1,000 units and then they make 2,000 units and then they make 5,000 units. I was like, how do I go from zero to making 30,000 units? What would I have to do for that to be possible? And basically, it's something like a Kickstarter.
So what year was the Kickstarter?
Jan 2018.
2018. So lots of brands attempt to launch and grow on Kickstarter, and they'll list, and then Kickstarter goes live or Indiegogo goes live, and nothing good happens. They might sell to some family and friends, but that's kind of it. Why do you think you had a successful raise through those platforms?
Oh man, so this is one of my favorite stories to tell because it's kind of wild and it encapsulates like the magic of desperation. So I had no money, and what a lot of people don't, a couple of misconceptions about Kickstarter. Number one, the point of Kickstarter is not to make profit to then like funnel back into running the business because your unit economics are so bad that that's just not possible. The real point of Kickstarter is prove out the idea that it actually works and people want it, generate a bunch of sales, and then be able to go raise some seed money based on that at a decent valuation, right? Because you have real sales. That is, from my perspective, for consumer goods, the point of a Kickstarter. That's like number one. Number two, you can't apply the marketing tactics that you would apply to, let's say, a Shopify site to a Kickstarter campaign because like meta ads won't work. No one's going to convert for you saying you're going to send them something in 6 months. Like it's just not going to happen. And by the way, it's like a very weird, clunky checkout process. And I'm backing you. I'm not actually buying. And half of the people never fulfill on their Kickstarter. Like there's so much friction that traditional mechanisms are like just so inefficient that you might as well not do them. And by the way, you need money to do those too, right? You need money to dump into meta ads. So that's the other misconception. You do need a little bit of money to run Kickstarter. So you're like, oh, Kickstarter is how I get money. No. You need money to even run the Kickstarter. Not a ton, but like call it 30 grand. If you really want to run like a good 50,000 plus Kickstarter. So I scratched together that from angels, like friend of a friend, but you know, it's 30K. It's not nothing crazy. So, but then the question is, okay, how do you run how do you get over 50,000, which was our goal, 50,000 in sales? And I had this crazy idea. Like I said, I went to Harvard undergrad, and at the Harvard library, I was still in Boston at the time, so I could just go back. At the library, there are these things called red books. And in a red book, it's like an alumni book, and it has one for every year. And so you can flip it open and it'll say, Will Nitze, I'm whatever, 30 years old. I live in Boston. I like tennis. I'm married. I have a dog. And here's my email address. And it has a contact element for each person. So I literally flipped through page by page and took picture across multiple decades of alumni books. And I found this software that could like pull email addresses out of images. And so I got, something like 15,000 email addresses from that. And then separately, my old boss had went to Harvard Business School. and and so he gave me his login. And they don't give out email addresses, but you can go to you can find the person, just their first and last name. If you go to advanced search and you do every permutation of like, was in the tennis club, was in the tennis club, and was in the international relations club, was only in the international relations club, right? You do all the permutation, and because it would only give you 100 results, I think. So you just keep changing the permutation, and you get tons of duplicates, but just pull all that out and dedupe the whole thing. I got something like 85% plus of like all people who had ever gone to HBS, which is just wild. Now I had their first and last name, but they all use the same template. So you just do a basic concatenate in Excel, first dot last at HBS, insert year, yada yada. That was like 85,000 email addresses. So now I had over 100,000 email addresses. Granted, these are strangers; they don't know who I am. But I created a MailChimp account, and I created this like basic email, which was like a picture of me and the product. And I was like, "Hey, my name's Will. I graduated class of 14. I did the whole woe is me, like little guy. I'm chasing my dreams. I have this project. It would mean the world if you just checked out this campaign, right? A little bit of the heartstrings move, and just blasted these people, right? Which of course is against, the rules. Like no one ever opted in. And I used my Harvard undergrad email address as the reply to, right? Because like you would kill your domain score otherwise. But that's not my domain. So, and of course, a zillion people marked it as spam and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, we made multiple thousands of dollars that way. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but like we made like $30,000 just from that. And tons of people are like, never email me again. How did you get my email? This is crazy, blah, blah, blah. But a ton of people were like, this is awesome. Like, love the hustle. I just bought 2 boxes or whatever. And these are all people, by the way, who have like disposable cash. So it was a good demographic. And then the beauty of Kickstarter is it's a momentum game. It's kind of like Amazon, right? Where you do better in the listings and then you sell more, and then that helps you do better in the listings and it sells more. So it's similar with Kickstarter. You want to stay on the front page of your category. So our category was food and bev. And the longer you're on that category, the more organic sales you get, because people just go to the food and bev front page, see you, click you, back you. And so ultimately half of all of our revenue was totally organic, $0 customer acquisition costs purchasers, because we were able to like keep that momentum, and by the way, once you're flagging, you have to like send another email, and then it bumps you back up and you stay on the home page and you get more organic. There's like 10 other things, right? I befriended the Kickstarter category manager, and they will put you in their like newsletters, which go out to every backer. And so these are all just things that, like, what's the commonality of these? They all cost $0 and are highly effective. But you won't find, like, both of those things, you won't find those on any blog post about how to run a good Kickstarter, which is kind of why they're fun.
It's an amazing story. And, here's why I love that. And I'm sure lots of people love that story is lots of people want to start a business. They want to start a brand, CPG or otherwise. And they do exactly what you're talking about, where they start researching the internet. How do I start a beverage business? And they'll look at the top 5 or 10 tips. And at some point they stall because they think, oh, I've got to, raise $500,000 in order to get this thing off the ground. Or, they just start seeing obstacles, and you were just like, screw that. I'm going to build a list using whatever I have. And connections to Harvard is fantastic. Using that community and building relationships with people at Kickstarter is a very smart move. So yeah, for anybody out there listening, like, everybody has some type of community. Everybody went to a school, or they've got family, or they're in some type of social group,
You're a
or
member
in
of a
your
church.
community.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the question is, like, how can you use and leverage what you have in order to achieve your goals? And just because there are brands out there that are dropping boatloads of cash on Meta ads or Google ads or whatever to get to, to grow, doesn't mean you need to do that. You can go out there and hustle, do some, use your sweat equity, find community, and grow that way. So that said, you did mention that you were able to do a small raise where you got 30K or so initially to help fund the Kickstarter, along with
Yeah.
the work you put in through, scraping emails and all that stuff. What did you use that money for to grow the Kickstarter?
Oh man, I mean, we had to produce a video, and we were so cheap about it all. I emailed the former CEO of my, well, not that at the time he was the current CEO of my software startup that I was working at. I was like, hey, can I come in on Saturday and film in the office? Because I didn't want to pay like a venue fee, and my friends acted in the video, and so like, but it was like 5 grand for the videographer and the guy with the boomstick and blah blah blah. So, creating all the creative assets for the Kickstarter page. We did dabble. There are these agencies that have like these lists. How they got these lists, I don't know, but have these lists of people who have backed a Kickstarter in the past that you can target via meta ads. And like the number one determinant if someone will back your project is have they backed a project at all ever? Because it's just a certain type of human being who likes doing Kickstarter. So we did invest a bit in paid ads. What else? And then we were also using some of that to make prototypes and improve the product and get the product manufacturing ready and investing in, gluten-free certificate and just like so many ticky-tacky costs. Um, and by the way, you're making two, three, $4,000 mistakes here and there, and that just adds up. And so, yeah, all of that money went away pretty quickly. And then you make, mistakes, by the way, on fulfillment. You're probably paying too high in postage because you don't really know how to optimize postage. So there's just so many ticky-tacky mistakes that add up in the early days. But yeah, so we did that and we fulfilled everything. And very quickly I turned around and I was like, okay, we need to raise 500,000 to $1 million. And we picked a number not out of the sky, but if we were worth $4 million, right? And that was just based on talk to 10 people. Hey, with a little bit of traction, 100K in sales, good team, good idea. Like that is like the market rate for whatever reason. Every time since then, it's all been based on sales and now EBITDA. But for your like first round, like that was just in that environment, that was a going rate. So raised actually it ended up being 625K, I think. And that, why raise that? Well, I wanted to hire a head of ops and finance and supply chain. And I would be like the sales and marketing person and fundraising guy and product guy. And that person was going to be finance and ops. And then I also hired a head of creative and social media and website. And then just like funding inventory, right? So it's just you need cash to fund inventory and your cogs are going to suck like invariably out the gate. And so it's just not that efficient of a cash conversion story for several years. We lost over $1 million for the first 5 years. And by the way, that's like good for consumer goods. And then we flipped profitable last year, like meaningfully profitable. And now we're kind of control our own destiny. But you definitely needed $5 million to get to scale to then get to profitability.
Gotcha. So, talk to me about the product evolution. So, you first launch on Kickstarter, you've got an idea for the product set, but it sounds like, you weren't manufacturing yet. You were just looking to prove that the concept was one that people would pay for, right?
Yep.
You get this, let's say 90K or so through this crowdfunding. And then I imagine that so then you're thinking about getting investment, but you also at some point have to start fulfilling orders and get the product ready.
Yep.
So can you talk to me about how you went to manufacturing product, what that looked like in terms of, yeah, what sort of flavor profiles do you go with? How do you know what ingredients to put in? How do you get product feedback to know whether people like it or not? Can you talk about that journey?
Yeah, it was very clunky. It was all trial and error based, which, by the way, most of CPG entrepreneurship is trial and error based, which is a feature, not a bug, because you'll get advice, and what you learn is trial and error almost always outperforms advice. because times change, markets shift, yada yada. So try everything. But I mean, there just weren't that many people who would manufacture, call it 30,000 bars. Period. There's just that like low end of volume of the marketplace. There's like 2, 3 players, and we met with all of them, and we liked one of them a lot, and they're in Spokane, Washington. And I didn't know how do you get from this prototype you made in the kitchen to being able to produce it on a line and make tens of thousands of them. And what I quickly learned is, they kind of force you into, or they did force us into using certain things because they knew it would machine well on their lines, and it would be more efficient. And so they made a lot of recommendations. And so the first version of the product was like at least half formulated by the manufacturer. And I would push back on things, and I would say, "Hey, can we get the sugar lower?" And they'd say, "No, because we need this amount of adhesiveness." And so actually the first product had 8 grams of sugar and I think 6 grams of protein. So like totally different. And I just didn't frankly know enough about food science and product development to be able to push back in certain areas, and the products were good. It just wasn't, like, I would say, nutritionally exceptional, that first batch. And we did try to get cute on the flavor title. So it was cacao, almond, sea salt. It was blueberry, sunflower, walnut. It was matcha chai, hazelnut. Those were our first 3 flavors. Like super flowery, Whole Foodsy. Because I thought that would be a differentiating vector. Is oh, that sounds so natural. And that was a huge learning of, don't try to get cute on flavor. Because you could have just called that chocolate sea salt, right? We chose to call it cacao almond sea salt because, oh, it's cacao, not chocolate. Turns out no one cares. No one cares about cacao. In fact, they don't know what it is, and it confuses them. So you asked how we get feedback. I mean, this is the beauty of starting an online business, is people will just tell you what they think. They'll email you, they'll leave reviews. Ideally, you have some sort of survey mechanism, post-purchase survey mechanism. And so you learn pretty damn quick. Like when you're selling thousands of units, you get a good sample size. And 60% of people thought this was too sweet. Okay, it's too sweet. We weren't like, oh, what's the p-value of that, and is that statistically significant? It's like, no, just like 6 out of 10 said that, and like, take a bite. Yeah, I see what they're saying. Okay, let's make the adjustment. And then, so it was like sort of organoleptic changes like that, like smell, taste, texture, etc. And then over time, I got more sophisticated food science wise and formulation wise, to where I was like, okay, how do we like keep jamming the sugar count down, 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 down? And then eventually, how do we layer in protein? Which, like, thank God we did that. I mean, as you know, like, seems like all in everything now, and everyone's like obsessed with it. We would have limited our total addressable market like by 10x had we not made that move. So thank God we did. But yeah, just got like more sophisticated. I personally got more sophisticated, and so I knew, and better at formulating. So I knew how to just achieve more exceptional results nutritionally. And then, like, the thing a lot of people don't talk about, but they really should, because this is why most companies like us fail, is COGS. It's not enough to make a great product, not even close to enough. You have to make a great product that has a path to get to 60% gross margin. And like, no, very, very few people can do that. And it really is like an art just as much as a science, because you can actually get quite creative with your supply chain. Like, you might think, oh, almonds are almonds. No, there's 5 different almond suppliers. They have different prices. You can have blanched almonds. You could have light roasted almonds. You could have full roasted almonds. You can dice them at this mesh size or that mesh size or that mesh size, blah, blah, blah. So, like, it's really, really actually complicated and nuanced once you set up a supply chain that has more than, call it, 30 inputs. And that is where you live and die, honestly. It's not really on the sales. I mean, sales marketing is important, but like, let's assume that you're somewhat competent at that. You're still going to die if you don't get really excellent at the supply chain and ops side and manufacturing side. And so that's why you see all these companies where you're like, they go under and you're like, I don't get it. It was a good product, like, well, almost certainly under the hood from a finance and ops standpoint, they were not good.
So how do you do that? Because manufacturers, whether it's a, food, beverage, consumable, or a hard good, manufacturers are going to kind of, like you said, force brands into their process because it's just easier for them, right?
Yeah.
So they'll say, oh,
Yep.
we already have these ingredients that we often purchase for other clients. So we just want to kind of have you run with that. Or our machines, our team is used to these ingredients. So we're just going to stick with that. So
Yep.
how do you approach them with the idea that, you know what, we're not going to use these almonds. We're going to try these other ones because they taste just as good as the primary one, but they're 30% cheaper. We're trying to drive our cost down. How do you approach that?
Part of it is like, you just force them to, you're like, look, this is the formula. And they'll say, okay, but we're going to need to do a trial run and that costs this and that. And then you say, okay. And you do a trial run and you prove it to them that it can machine, it can work, and it can produce units at scale. That's the other thing that makes it even harder. It has to produce a certain amount of units per minute to be economical. So it's like you can make a really good thing, but if you have to like bake it for this amount of time and then you need this drizzle over here and then well, guess what? You can only make 50 units a minute instead of 200 a minute. That's a problem. You have to be, so it's just, yeah, it's, you're threading so many different needles at once. But, I mean, you just have to say, look, this is the deal. And you have to do all the work for them, right? They'll give advice. Hey, maybe if we mixed for half the time, you get the same result and we get bars on the slab line quicker. Okay, let's try that. The trial and like, again, I come back to trial and error. There is definitely heavy trial and error, which is expensive, by the way, right? Because you screw up a batch and then you have to throw the batch out. There goes $8,000. So, you know, and that's painful in the early days. And so you make damn sure that you're putting yourself in the highest odds of success scenarios possible on the manufacturing line, and you do all your homework you can beforehand. I would say another just like macro thing that allowed us to do that is I got obsessed with the product and like all the technical elements of it. There are many founders who will outsource that. They'll get like an R&D specialist and that person will make all the products, and the founder's like not even like intimately knowledgeable about all the ins and outs and why this input was chosen instead of that input. And so they just like they can't evolve the product because they don't intimately understand it. They can't really problem solve around the product because they don't intimately understand it. Like it creates a lot of downstream problems for them. They can't reduce COGS because they wouldn't even know where to start. And so I think that's like a terrible, terrible idea. You as the founder have to know the product and the ins and outs, and ideally be able to create the product in your own kitchen if it's a food and bev item, or lab if it's otherwise. So that's like one of the number one piece of advice I give to people. Is like, if you're not a food scientist, become become an amateur food scientist. Like, get at least dangerous enough to be able to do 80% of the work.
That's where passion comes in when running an e-commerce brand, D2C brand, CPG, whatever. Founders who are passionate about what they're doing just have a leg up because they're willing to put in the time and effort to go into those details that you're talking about, right? Where it's analyzing every ingredient, digging through and trying to figure out how you can minimize cost, increase output, make the product more efficient while still delivering a product that people are interested in, and learning those insights over time where it's, people didn't want those exotic flavor names. They wanted something that they were more used to and something that was a bit more, let's say, comforting for them because they're used to chocolate, peanut butter, almond versus something a little bit more exotic. So, yeah, founders need to do all of that stuff. They're going to be more successful if they're intimately aware of all of those details. So, okay, awesome. So you go through the Kickstarter, you raise funds that way. Through that process, you're dialing in the product, you're going through manufacturing, you choose a manufacturer, you're working on improving the product, making it more efficient. You do the second raise where you get an additional, let's say 650K or so that you can then invest in product and growing the brand, right? So through that time, what are you doing to market the brand and how are you doing that between, let's say, direct to consumer along with retail as well?
Yeah, I mean, we were doing zero top of the funnel stuff. So it was all like direct response, like bottom of the funnel stuff. And so this is not like what makes us all that innovative. We were doing all the blocking and tackling that I think most people would suggest that you do. We were doing meta ads, email marketing. And then we rolled out a D2C site, and then we pretty quickly thereafter rolled out an Amazon storefront. And Amazon actually started outpacing D2C quite quickly. I think it was partially a function of the era because keto got really big, and we got a little bit lucky because our bars were keto compliant, and keto just became this like massive mega trend that, by the way, lasted for like 7 years. Most people thought it would last 2, 3 years. It lasted 7 years. So there's just so many more people searching for keto products on Amazon, and we were one of like 2, 3 bars. And so so much demand just fell out of the sky. And of course, we were bidding on, keywords aggressively on Amazon. We weren't even doing display advertisements on Amazon for several years. So yeah, it was just bidding on keywords and then meta ads. And we were not profitable in either channel. Again, this was mostly as a function of our ops and lack of scale and our cogs being too high and all that. We did another kind of counterintuitive thing. Most people will come out and price more premium. So for a box of 12 bars, I might price at $32.99 or something like that, or $29.99. We came in and we priced at $24.99. We've never once raised our prices, even during COVID. We priced like sharply from the get-go. And the reason was that was the right move, it turned out, because we play in really price conscious categories. And so there's just so much more volume at $24.99 than there is at $29.99. And the way I always saw it was we have to get to volume, like unit volume, not necessarily dollar volume, but unit volume, in order to fix our gross margin, basically. This is why it's such a tough business. You have to get to like 20 to 30 million in net sales to be able to right size your P&L. That just is what it is. It's like there's no getting around it. You just need to be able to jam down your labor cost per unit and renegotiate down all your material input costs. And so, like, price is so overlooked as a marketing element. Like, price is marketing. People don't think of it like that, but it is. And we've seen this in brick and mortar, by the way, as well. So you asked about how did we layer on brick and mortar? We had some misadventures. Actually, our first retailer was CVS, which was kind of a disaster. People aren't really searching for health food in the drug channel. But we got a lot of really good learnings from it. And then we started going into Kroger and Walmart. And by the way, a lot of these retailers came to us because we had built a good digital presence, which is like epic. That did not used to be the case. But in today's market, brick and mortar retail category managers look at like Amazon and they're like, I'm a bar buyer. What are the top 10 bars on Amazon? Because maybe I'm missing some innovation. They always want something fresh and they always want to stay on trend. And so we got like Walmart because we had a good Amazon business. That like blew my mind when it happened. And then, by the way, a Costco buyer in the LA region reached out to us because she saw us on Amazon and was a consumer. So the order of operations matters a lot here. Had we not built a big e-com business first, we don't get those cold emails. But to dovetail back to my earlier point, like what is a massively, massively, massively underrated marketing element on a physical shelf? Price. It's not sexy and people don't really talk about it. They're not posting about it because it's not like a fun topic to talk about. But when we've noted, like for a 4 count on a Walmart shelf, when we went from $6.97 to $5.99, velocity, like the number of 4 packs per week, per store, per SKU were like double, almost double. So anyway, that's just like, it's one of those things that I feel like never gets covered. And for us, we've noticed moves the needle quite a bit.
Well, What's great about that is, pricing as a marketing strategy is nice because you can increase volume, which on its own is important, right? You need to get to a certain scale. And, in order to get a profitability, you need to have enough sales. So that all makes sense. But the other sort of hidden thing there is the more volume you do, the more word of mouth you're going to get, especially for a brand that people are consuming, not just at home, but potentially at the office or on the go. And when there are brands where people are using that product in some type of community where other people can see it, that's just kind of free marketing, right? So if you get a buyer at that $5.99 price point that would not have purchased at $6.49 or a little bit higher, yeah, you get that sale. But even if you're not making money on that person, when he or she is at the office cracking some of these bars open, or they're talking to somebody about, hey, I'm working out and I've been trying this new bar in order to, manage my cravings and stay away from any added sugar. And they have a conversation about IQBAR. Well, now that one customer you broke even on, they're a marketer for you. They're an outdoor sales rep that you don't have to pay. So getting to a certain sales velocity allows you to build your word of mouth channel, which is something that is so underrated and people don't talk about that much either. But when you can have people using your product and talking about it, that can be massive. So if you can capture more sales at a lower price point, yeah, maybe you lose 50 cents in profit, right? But if that customer, every 10 of those customers brings in one a free customer, and all of a sudden, your marketing engine can be firing in all cylinders. So yeah, I love that pricing strategy as a piece of your marketing. So, a lot of people talk about retail and D2C and how getting into retail can fuel your D2C sales, right? Because if people see your product on the shelves, it's a sign of trust and people might be more likely to purchase online, especially if they're traveling, they see your product in Walmart, but they just want to order online. Well, what's
Yeah.
great is you're talking about the opposite, where it's growing your D2C channel has actually fueled retail because lots of people would love to get into Walmart. Lots of people would love to get into Kroger, but they have trouble doing that. So they have to work through distributors and try to get into those stores. But you're saying that your sales velocity online allowed those inbound leads to come through, opening up a whole other channel for you. And, we see that with brands, regardless of product category. The more visibility there is online, the more likelihood there's going to be some type of customer base from a wholesale standpoint or from like a custom order standpoint. So that's great you're doing that. So you said last year the brand became profitable. What did you do last year versus the previous, let's say, 6 years or so that allowed you to um, turn the business to a profitable one?
Volume, volume. That's it. Um, we didn't do much else differently. I mean, what you just described, by the way, it's bi-directional. Brick and mortar feeds online and vice versa. And once you get enough touch points with consumers, you start to be able to acquire them more cheaply. So we just have more touch points, right? And someone sees us in Costco, then they see us in Walmart, then they see us in Amazon, and then they convert. So, like, there's so many windfalls that happen with volume. The primary one is just you can negotiate lower what's called tolling rates, which is labor cost per unit, and then you can negotiate lower material costs. And you can be shipping more. You can get lower freight costs per unit because now you're shipping more full truckloads. So your freight cost per unit is amortizing across more units for every time your stuff's going on a truck. Like everything gets better. You're shipping more parcels, so you can negotiate better terms with DHL or whatever carrier you're going all in on. Like volume fixes everything. I would say too, we had a couple, Walmart and Costco and Sam's Club, and we got to a certain volume just within a channel, and those channels started feeding the bottom line of the business. I mean, Costco is there's only one Costco. It's an incredible retailer, and we actually sell for by far the cheapest of anywhere we sell for in America, and still you're just moving so much product. Like it's hard to even fathom how much product you're moving because we're talking about tens of trucks of each truck has I don't even know, 200,000 units on it. So it's just the volume gets eye-wateringly big. Our goal every year is to double in size, which mostly was just a fun, like, why? It's not a bottoms up, it's a tops down. It's like, hey, we want to double. How do we do that? Why? Because we knew we had to get to, call it 30 million in revenue to have the volume to flip profitable. And that was definitely true. So it's a scale game we're playing in consumer goods. And a lot of people, by the way, say you don't like the economies of scale are largely a myth and the price is the price. That's definitely not true in our experience. The economies of scale, we took our cost per bar from like $1.20 down to like well under half that, which just totally transforms your P&L.
Amazing. So I like that you were talking about Costco because I was there on Saturday doing some shopping and I saw a stack of IQBAR, so picked up a variety pack. So good
Love
job
it.
getting into some pretty big retailers. So completely get what you're saying about volume. That's awesome that that was the driver to get you to profitability last year. Let's kind of take a step back. Learning everything you've learned through this journey. Let's say if you were going to start over and you wanted to grow a brand from zero to, let's just say, your first seven figures in revenue, knowing now what you know, right? How would you do things differently? What would your playbook look like?
I don't actually think I would do things differently. I maybe would. I know this is more of a D2C podcast, but I may lean into Amazon quicker. Like it's very category dependent. So in bars, it's just there's such a massive amount of people who buy bars on Amazon, and there's just a lot of low hanging fruit, and there's a lot of people who are like ready to like high purchase intent. And so we just found for that category, the quickest way to scale up online, and by the way, most efficient way is via Amazon. So I would if the thing I wanted to do was still that held true for, then I would probably go harder at Amazon earlier. Now, certain categories are not that way, right? Beauty, very I might say go harder at D2C earlier, right? It's so context dependent. But like net, I think what I wish I learned a little sooner was really two things. Number one, obsess over the product, which sounds obvious, but I think most people get to a like good enough or pretty good and then they try and scale that. And really you should keep pushing it till it's like excellent product because that makes everything better. You acquire customers easier, you retain customers, blah, blah, blah. Second piece is lean into the 80/20 principle, which is so true across everything in consumer goods. 20% of your channels or accounts will give you 80% of your revenue. Find big, ultra scalable channels and go really, really hard after them. Might even be one channel, but I can't tell you how much time we've spent on like ticky tacky, three store chain or five store chain, which is nothing against them, right? Like these are great chains, but just from a dollars and cents standpoint, like it is the same amount of effort to snag that chain and sell into that chain than it is to snag 1,000, store chain. So just focus on the whales earlier than you think you should.
All right, so let's move on to the speed round. So each answer in like 30 to 60 seconds or less. So, what is
Cool.
one of your most recommended books?
They actually have the same name. I really like Traction by Gino Wickman, and then another book called Traction by Gabriel Weinberg, and I believe it's Nick Mares. But yeah, both of those books are two of my favorites, and they're both called Traction.
Two for one. Fantastic. What is an under the radar product or brand you have used and like, but most people do not know about?
Oh man, this is super random. My wife uses this thing called Clean Skin Club, which is like a facial wipe. Because I guess there's all this stuff you do where you're like, I didn't know how gross that was. Like you wipe your towel on your face, but your towel has all this like, bacteria on it or whatever. So I actually don't even use it. My wife does, but she uses it every day. Um, and I think it's kind of still under the radar. So Clean Skin Club would be mine.
Cool. What is one thing in life that you do better than most people, and how do you do it? And this is just something that naturally comes to you and you're better at it than most.
I act sooner and I go to the source quicker. So like I just pick up the phone and call people, which is funny. Like it sounds obvious, and I guess people used to do that, but they don't really anymore. I just go right to the source, and I don't like try to work my way to someone's assistant and then get to them. Like just pick up the phone, call that person. And that's, I think, just generally more of like a bias towards action that I have. I don't know why I have that.
Love it. Tell me about your favorite shopping experience, online or offline.
I love Costco. It's just like a Disney World. Like it's just fun. I mean, I love it for multiple reasons. I love it as a shopper, but also like I just appreciate efficiency. It's just so efficient. Same goes for Sam's Club and BJ's, but like I just love the club channel. I think it's so cool that that exists.
Some friends were recommending Costco to me for years, and I never did. I never joined. And then last year we joined up, and I'm like addicted. Every Saturday I'm there. Just can't get enough. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Will, where can people connect with you to learn more?
Yeah, IQBAR.com is their site. I put out musings on LinkedIn, Will Nitze, Nitze. Try to do that daily. At IQBAR is our social handle. And yeah, check out our store locator too if you want to try a bar or a hydration mix or coffee. And we're probably sold somewhere near you.
Awesome. Will, thank you so much for bringing IQBAR to market as a way to provide better functional food and drinks to the masses, sharing your expertise and insights with our audience, and for joining us on the Shopify Happy Hour.